the shadows of the Pentagon's operational rooms, a haunting silence hangs over the weary faces of high-ranking generals. What the world hears through official briefings in Washington is merely the tip of a submerged iceberg filled with destruction and miscalculations. Today's headlines speak of Operation Epic Fury, of preemptive precision strikes that eliminated 40 high-ranking Iranian commanders, but behind that steel curtain lies a harsher reality that the United States military is desperately trying to hide at all costs. A critical security breach in the military data transmission network has leaked raw, unedited satellite imagery to the public. These photos do not show clean surgical strikes as seen in the movies. They reveal scenes of devastation and the helplessness of defense systems at strategic bases spanning from Bahrain to Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. This is the true price of a war that President Donald Trump claimed was to bring peace and democracy, but is actually pushing the entire Middle East into a black hole of chaos with no exit. We begin at Udeid Air Base in Qatar, once considered an impregnable fortress and the nerve center of the United States military in the Gulf. Leaked imagery from Maxar satellites shows massive craters gouged into the main runway, completely paralyzing all takeoff and landing operations for the F-35 fighter jets. Armored hangars, designed to withstand direct hits, are now torn open like tinfoil under the terrifying power of Fatah II ballistic missiles. Although the Pentagon claims damage is minimal and there are no significant casualties, the raw satellite data tells a different story of expensive tankers and military transport aircraft now reduced to burning scrap metal in the red flames. In Bahrain, the situation at the headquarters of the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet is equally dire. Thick black smoke rises from ammunition, and fuel depots hit directly, forming a dark cloud that has obscured the Gulf sky for the past 48 hours. Intelligence analysts spent 15 years studying every vent of the Fordo nuclear facility, but they seem to have made a fatal mistake in underestimating Iran's asymmetric counterattack capabilities when backed into a corner. This destruction does not stop at the walls of military bases. Commercial satellites have captured terrifying moments as interceptor missile debris falls onto luxury residential areas in Dubai. At Palm Jumeirah, a symbol of wealth and prosperity, an Iranian suicide drone pierced through the wall of fire and crashed directly into a high-end five-star hotel, turning this tourist paradise into a battlefield of shattered glass and screams. The Pentagon does not want the public to see these images because they are the clearest evidence that the Patriot missile shield and the THAAD system are not infinite as advertised. In a fierce war of attrition, Iran is using a sea of missiles tactic with thousands of cheap projectiles to overload and exhaust the alliance's expensive air defense systems. Each interceptor missile costs up to several $1 million, while the targets they try to protect are being slowly erased from the strategic map. The biggest shock, the fuse for all this madness, was the death of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Sources confirm the Supreme Leader was eliminated in the first wave of airstrikes on the Pasteur complex in Tehran. However, instead of the rapid regime collapse that Trump expected, this death triggered the Mosaic defense system, turning all of Iran into 31 autonomous combat units, ready to turn the Middle East into a living hell for any foreign force that dares to set foot on their land. The leak reveals that the United States military is now facing a ghost army, a decentralized force that does not rely on a central command, making the traditional American strategy of decapitation strikes completely obsolete. As the fires continue to burn across the region, the world is beginning to realize that the Pentagon's silence is not a sign of victory, but a mask for a disaster of unprecedented proportions. The collapse of the traditional military doctrine that the United States has applied for decades became apparent immediately after the smoke from the explosions in Tehran cleared. When Hellfire missiles hit their targets, the Pentagon's artificial intelligence algorithms predicted a swift surrender from the Iranian side. However, what followed was a logistical nightmare that no simulation could have foreseen. The Mosaic defense system is not just an operational plan. It is a living entity. A network of independent combat cells activated the moment the Supreme Leader's heart stopped beating. Leaked satellite images show a staggering shift in Iran's force posture. No longer are their long military convoys acting as easy targets for the United States Air Force. Instead, there are tens of thousands of mobile missile launch points cleverly camouflaged in caves and residential areas. Each unit across Iran's 31 provinces now operates as its own military state, with the authority to decide strike targets without waiting for orders from a central command. This renders Washington's decapitation strategy meaningless, as they are now facing a multi-headed hydra where every head cut off is replaced by dozens of others more ferocious than the last. At Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates, home to the F-22 Raptor stealth fighters, the destruction was even more horrific than initial reports suggested. Third-party reconnaissance satellites captured the site of at least 6 aircraft worth billions of dollars destroyed right on the taxiway by a swarm of low-altitude suicide drones. These are low-cost weapons built from civilian components, yet they possess the ability to slip through the gaps of the most sophisticated radar systems. The Pentagon attempted to block this information by jamming satellite signals in the region, but this leak has exposed the truth. There is no safe place for the United States military in the Middle East. Fires at strategic fuel depots have remained unextinguished for over 72 hours, creating a massive smoke plume visible from space, a symbol of a superpower's helplessness against a resilient and cunning adversary. Meanwhile, global energy markets are in a state of extreme chaos as the Strait of Hormuz has been completely closed by smart mines and Iranian unmanned submarines. Crude oil prices have surged past $150 a barrel in just 48 hours, threatening to collapse the economies of Western allies. Geopolitical analysis shows that Washington was overconfident in its ability to control escalation. They thought that by eliminating 40 key leaders, they would paralyze the Iranian military. But in reality, this action released the most radical elements of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who now have nothing left to lose and are ready to carry out suicide attacks against any economic target in the region. This data leak is not just a cybersecurity failure, it is a heavy blow to the credibility of the Trump administration, proving that promises of a quick and inexpensive victory were merely clumsy lies intended to reassure the public before a global crisis. Darkness is descending upon the Gulf, and this is only the beginning of a prolonged confrontation where the price paid will be measured in blood and the collapse of the old world order. The leaked files also suggest that American aircraft carriers, once the ultimate symbols of power, are now being shadowed by swarms of fast attack craft, forcing the Navy to retreat further into the Indian Ocean and leaving its regional allies vulnerable to the coming storm. The leaked intelligence dossier, now circulating through encrypted channels and dark web forums, reveals a terrifying dimension of the conflict that goes far beyond physical destruction. It is not just about the craters in the sand or the twisted metal of fighter jets. It is about the total collapse of the technological superiority that the United States has relied on since the end of the Cold War. The satellite imagery, which the Pentagon desperately tried to classify as Russian or Chinese disinformation, provides a clear view into the heart of the Zagros Mountains. Here, the leak exposes what the Iranian military calls Silo Cities underground complexes buried more than 500 meters deep, carved into solid rock that even the most powerful American bunker busters cannot penetrate. These are not merely storage facilities. They are fully automated launch centers capable of firing hundreds of precision-guided missiles every hour. The leaked thermal scans show these facilities glowing with activity, proving that despite the thousands of sorties flown by United States and Israeli air forces, the core of Iran's retaliatory power remains almost entirely intact. This revelation has sent shockwaves through the halls of Congress, where lawmakers were told that a decapitation strike would neutralize the threat within 48 hours. Instead, the leak indicates that the United States military is now operating in a blind spot. Iran's electronic warfare units, utilizing a mix of indigenous technology and black market components, have successfully deployed a sophisticated GPS jamming curtain across the Persian Gulf. This has rendered the high-tech guidance systems of Tomahawk missiles and JDAM bombs increasingly unreliable. The leaked documents include frantic internal communications from the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, where officers describe ghost targets appearing on their radar screens, forcing the carrier strike group to retreat further into the North Arabian Sea to avoid a potential swarm attack. This tactical withdrawal, which the White House officially labeled as a strategic repositioning, is shown in the leaked data as a desperate move to save the fleet from an invisible and unpredictable enemy. Furthermore, the economic implications of these revelations are staggering. The leak confirms that the Iranian military has successfully mined the deepest channels of the Strait of Hormuz with encrypted, acoustic-triggered mines that cannot be cleared by traditional mine-sweeping methods. This has effectively cut off 20% of the world's daily oil supply. Shipping insurance rates have skyrocketed by 500% in a single week, making it financially impossible for commercial tankers to enter the region. While the Trump administration continues to project an image of absolute control, the leaked economic projections from within the Treasury Department warn of a global recession deeper than the one experienced in 2008. The data suggests that if the blockade continues for another 30 days, the strategic petroleum reserves of the United States and its allies will reach dangerously low levels, potentially leading to fuel rationing and widespread civil unrest. What is perhaps most damaging in this leak is the evidence of a deep rift between the civilian leadership in the White House and the professional military command at Central Command. The documents reveal that several high-ranking generals argued against the strike on the Pasteur complex, warning that killing the supreme leader would only serve to radicalize the various factions within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and trigger the uncontrollable Mosaic defense protocols. These warnings were reportedly ignored in favor of a political win before the upcoming elections. Now, the United States finds itself locked in a war of attrition where the enemy has no central headquarters to destroy and no single leader to negotiate with. The leak shows that the Iranian people, instead of rising up to welcome their liberators as predicted, have largely rallied around the flag in the face of what they perceive as an existential threat. The images of civilian casualties in cities like Minab and Shiraz, captured by neutral satellites and leaked alongside military data, have fueled a fire of nationalist fervor that the Pentagon's psychological operations units are completely unable to extinguish. As the conflict enters its second week, the world is watching a superpower struggle to maintain its grip on a situation that has spiraled far beyond its initial calculations. The leaked imagery provides a haunting look into the southern city of Minab, where a supposed precision strike on a missile battery instead leveled an entire residential block, including a local school. The Pentagon's official statement claimed no civilian casualties, but the high-resolution satellite photos show a different story. 120 bodies were seen being pulled from the rubble, documented by local activists and verified by the metadata in the leak. This is the collateral damage that Washington refers to in clinical terms, but on the ground, it is a catalyst for an unstoppable insurgency. The leak reveals that the United States military is well aware of these casualties, yet they continue to maintain a public narrative of surgical accuracy. This discrepancy is creating a massive credibility gap that is being exploited by rival powers to turn international opinion against the intervention. The hour of freedom promised by Donald Trump has turned into a nightmare of perpetual fire for the Iranian people. In the leaked cables, we see a frantic exchange between the White House and the State Department. Diplomats are warning that the liberation narrative is dead on arrival. Instead of being greeted with flowers, American Special Forces units attempting to infiltrate the coast of Bandar Abbas have been met with a wall of resistance from the local populace, many of whom were previously critics of the regime but are now driven by a raw, survivalist anger. The satellite leak includes heat maps showing hundreds of small-scale skirmishes occurring simultaneously across the country, indicating that the resistance is not centralized but organic and widespread. The leak also exposes the catastrophic failure of the Iron Dome and David's sling systems in protecting key Israeli cities. For the first time, we see unedited footage of Iranian Fatah missiles impacting the outskirts of Tel Aviv and Haifa. The sheer volume of the barrage, estimated at over 700 missiles in a single night, simply overwhelmed the most advanced defense network in the world. The Pentagon's internal assessment, leaked alongside these images, suggests that the interceptor stockpile is being depleted 10 times faster than it can be replenished. This creates a terrifying window of vulnerability that the Mosaic defense cells are already exploiting. The data shows that the United States is being forced to divert its own naval defense assets to protect Israel, leaving its own carriers in the Persian Gulf increasingly exposed to Iranian submarine threats. While the mainstream media focuses on the strategic victories, the leak shows the breakdown of the American supply chain. The massive logistics hubs in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia are being targeted by long-range drones, causing a shortage of critical spare parts for the F-35 fleet. Without these parts, nearly 30% of the American air superiority is grounded, leaving the ground troops exposed to the relentless harassment of the Ghost Army. The leaked documents describe a military that is technologically superior but logistically fragile, a giant with glass feet being slowly worn down by 1,000 cuts. The cost of maintaining this operation is estimated at over $2 billion per day, a figure that was never disclosed to the American taxpayers. The most chilling part of the leak is a series of intercepted radio transmissions from the decentralized units of the Revolutionary Guard. They are not waiting for a signal from Tehran. They are operating on a pre-planned script of total war. They do not care about the death of the Ayatollah. They view him as a martyr whose blood has sanctified their mission. This psychological shift is something the Pentagon's behavioral analysts completely missed. They expected a leaderless mob, but they found a decentralized, highly motivated, and technologically capable resistance that thrives in the chaos. The leak confirms that the war is no longer about regime change. It has become a war for the survival of the Iranian identity, and that is a conflict that cannot be won with cruise missiles alone. As the conflict enters its second week, the cracks in the international alliance are beginning to crumble under the weight of the leaked evidence. The images of devastated bases and civilian casualties have stripped away the moral high ground that Washington once claimed. In the halls of the United Nations, traditional allies in Europe and Asia are increasingly distancing themselves from the Trump administration's strategy, fearing that a regional conflagration will ignite a global economic depression. The leak contains a series of high-level diplomatic cables showing that several North Atlantic Treaty Organization members have refused to provide overflight rights or logistical support, effectively isolating the United States and Israel in their crusade. This geopolitical isolation is something the Pentagon never planned for, as they assumed a swift victory would silence all critics. Instead, the world is witnessing a superpower bogged down in a decentralized war with no clear boundaries and no defined end date. The satellite leak also sheds light on a dark secret that the Pentagon has tried to bury: the desertion rates among regional proxy forces. Thermal imagery shows that several key outposts in eastern Syria and northern Iraq are being abandoned by local militia groups that were once paid to support American interests. These forces, seeing the effectiveness of Iran's mosaic defense and fearing the wrath of the Ghost Army, are melting away into the night, leaving American special operations teams exposed and unsupported. The leaked reports describe a sense of panic within the ranks, as soldiers realize that high-tech drones and satellite surveillance cannot protect them from an enemy that lives among the people and strikes from the shadows. The intelligence failure is total. The United States spent billions of dollars on signals intelligence, but failed to understand the cultural and religious resolve of a people who see this not as a political struggle, but as a sacred defense of their homeland. Economically, the situation is far more dire than the public has been led to believe. Leaked data from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund suggests that the global economy is on the brink of a systemic collapse. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively a no-go zone, oil prices have touched the $200 a barrel mark, pushing inflation rates in the West to levels not seen in 40 years. The leak reveals that the United States is secretly negotiating with rival powers like Russia and China, pleading with them to increase production or pressure Iran to reopen the shipping lanes. However, the leaked correspondence shows that Moscow and Beijing are in no hurry to help. They see the American quagmire in the Middle East as a strategic gift, a way to bleed United States resources and prestige while they expand their own influence in Asia and Eastern Europe. Inside the Pentagon, leaked memos indicate a growing insurgency within the Joint Chiefs of Staff. A top-secret briefing document warns that the current path will lead to a strategic defeat of historic proportions. It points out that the kill list provided by intelligence agencies was outdated and based on false assumptions about Iran's chain of command. The death of the supreme leader, instead of ending the war, has created 31 separate wars, each as fierce and unpredictable as the first. Generals are now advising a complete withdrawal to the outer rim of the region, a move that would mark the end of American hegemony in the Middle East. But the leak shows that the White House is pushing for further escalation, ordering the deployment of 50,000 more troops to the region, a decision that the leaked analysis calls a recipe for disaster. The world is now watching a slow-motion train wreck, captured in high resolution by the very satellites that were supposed to ensure American victory. The final chapter of this leaked intelligence reveals the ultimate failure of the Pentagon's projection of power in the modern era. It is not just about the loss of hardware or the physical destruction of bases. It is about the total collapse of the American strategic soul in a region that has once again become a graveyard for empires. The leaked documents include a secret memo from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff addressed to the Oval Office, stating in no uncertain terms that the United States cannot win a conventional war against a decentralized ghost army. The memo estimates that to truly neutralize the 31 autonomous combat cells created by the Mosaic defense, it would require an occupation force of over 700,000 troops, a commitment that would not only bankrupt the American Treasury but would also necessitate a national draft. This is the grim reality that Donald Trump and his inner circle are hiding behind a wall of patriotic rhetoric and carefully filtered news clips. They speak of liberation, but the leaked satellite data shows a superpower that is internally paralyzed by its own miscalculations. The satellite leak concludes with a series of high-resolution images from the heart of Washington, D.C., showing late-night meetings at the White House and the frantic movement of classified files. This suggests that the leak itself may have originated from the very top of the military establishment, a desperate act by those who realize that the current path is leading toward a global catastrophe. The data confirms that the United States is currently losing the cyber war as well, with critical infrastructure in several major American cities experiencing unexplained power outages and communication failures attributed by intelligence agencies to Iranian retaliatory hacking groups. The Pentagon's silence on these domestic vulnerabilities is the most damning evidence of all. They have brought a war to the streets of Tehran, but they have also inadvertently brought the consequences back to the doorsteps of the American people. The leak shows that the national power grid is at its highest state of alert, yet the public is being told that everything is under control. As we analyze the final images of the burning oil fields and the shattered runways of Al Udeid, we are forced to confront a new world order. The era of the single, undisputed superpower is over, replaced by a chaotic and multipolar world where a decentralized network of motivated fighters can hold the world's most advanced military at bay. The leaked intelligence is a warning to the future. It shows that technology is merely a tool, not a solution, and that ideology and national pride are forces that cannot be accurately calculated by any computer algorithm. The devastation at the bases is just the visible beginning of a deeper decline. What the Pentagon desperately doesn't want the world to see is the image of a superpower in strategic retreat, its influence waning in the very region it sought to dominate, and its promises of global security proven to be hollow. The fire that was started with a single series of missile strikes in Tehran has now grown into a global inferno that threatens to consume the existing international system. As the leaked files show, no one in the current administration has a viable plan to put it out. This is the story of a war that was marketed as being easy and short, but instead became the defining tragedy of the 21st century. The final frame of the satellite leak shows the sun setting over the Persian Gulf, its orange light reflecting off the massive oil slicks and the twisted debris of $100 billion of military equipment. It stands as a silent, haunting monument to the arrogance of power and the limits of force. The world now knows the truth that was hidden in the shadows of the Pentagon, and the silence that follows is more deafening than the explosions that started it all.